So again, we are so excited to kick off day 2 with a presentation from Dr. Alvita Thomas, the president of Southern Crescent Technical College, and Dr. Mrs. Adi Hodge Shiamandel, the executive director of Technical Colleges Association of Georgia. And we are so excited to have you both joining us today. We are prepared for a worthwhile presentation that will certainly highlight the importance of technical colleges throughout the state of Georgia and basically how they drive economic development and individual prosperity. So we thank you both for taking time out of your busy schedules to present during the conference today, and we will go ahead and turn it over to you. I will be navigating the slides for you, so when you need me to proceed forward, please just let me know. But thank you again. We are so happy to have you.
Thank you so much for having us. We're delighted to be here, always happy to talk about what the technical college system does in Georgia, and excited to let everybody know that we really are a true economic development, workforce development engine for the state of Georgia. And so the slides today will show you that. And I'm gonna turn it over to Adi so that she can kind of kick us off.
All righty. The objectives today, we want to tell you, how did technical skills really come to be? And I think you'll be surprised to know that they came from the very first civilizations. I'm going to cover the history of technical skills, and then I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Thomas, who's going to talk about the resilient careers that we offer at the technical colleges today. And then I will come back and close it off by telling you more about the careers of the future that we have got on our drawing board. Let's start at the beginning. We need to go back more than 11,000 years to people like the Indus, the Mesopotamians, and the Egyptians. And recently, there's been the discovery of the Mungo woman in southwest South New Wales. Next slide. By a geologist by the name of Jim Bowler. He was tooling along trying to dig around a dried out lake called Lake Mungo when he discovered in 1968 the remains of a female. They have dated those remains back to about 40,000 BCE. And then in 1974, they found more remains. These are the remains of Mungo man. Not only were there remains of human beings there, but there were also artifacts and an indication that there was agriculture. This implies that there was some type of maybe a small village, maybe a small community, and they certainly needed some technical skills to protect that community and perhaps even build some type of floating devices for their transportation. Next slide. Archaeologists place the start of what we call urban civilization between 10,000 and 7,000 BCE with the Indus, the Mesopotamians, and the Egyptian civilizations. The Mesopotamians and the Indus gave us planned streets, baked brick houses, jewelry, bangles. They also gave us mathematics and a form of writing. The Egyptians were masters at math, and they gave us these great, big, beautiful structures. And if you look at the 240-foot long Sphinx that's there, you talk about the ultimate selfie. They believe that is a replica of Khafre, who was the son of Pharaoh Khufu, whose pyramid you see in the background there. And at the Vatican Museum, you can actually see a form of the writing called cuneiform, which is about 5,000 tablets they have spread throughout the world. Next slide. Work-based skills are what we call apprenticeships, and generational skills have been practiced for thousands of years, starting with the very first civilizations. There are 5 elements to a civilization. You have to have agriculture, you need weaponry, art, a social structure, and some type of political governance. The Mesopotamians had it all. Generational skills and apprenticeships were paramount to the economic growth and survival of all citizens. And that knowledge transfer helped to sustain and grow economic development. If you were in the working class, then you went into the family business. But if you had connections or affluence, you may want to go to a more formal school. Next slide. The first known school, professional school, were writing schools called de base, and they go back to 3500 BCE. That name literally means tablet school. And as a matter of fact, the first known textbook has been found in an ancient city right outside of Iraq. And the tablets go back to 2500 BCE. These tablets contain the names of gods that they worshiped, words, phrases, and even some accounting. Now, if you didn't want to really work in the skills, you went and hung out with some of the cool people like Socrates and learned the Socratic method, or maybe you went to the Academy of Athens that was opened by Plato, or perhaps you sat at the feet of Aristotle and learned a little bit about political science and deductive reasoning. Then there were the universities. The oldest continually operating university today is in Fez, Morocco, founded by a female called Fatima al-Fari, opened in 859 AD. Next. And talk about apprenticeships and generational skills. The careers of that day were stonemasons, sword stomping, lapidarists, chariot maintenance. Now, as you read this list, think about something. We have those careers today, just under a different name. For example, lapidarists, I think Shane Company and Tiffany's. Chariot maintenance and building, automobile repair. And messengers, I think FedEx and UPS. Resilient skills that last a lifetime. They last centuries, just under different names. Next. And if you had true professional skills, especially in stonemason, you may have the honor of having generations of your family working on something like York Minster Abbey. The official name of York is the Cathedral and Metropolitan Cathedral of St. Peter in York. And I want you to look at this magnificent structure. Took 252 years to build. This is 524.5 feet tall. And it's still an active church. You can get married there, sing in the choir, attend church services, because they still maintain stonemasons and glaziers to help keep this magnificent structure up to safety standards. And something important about structure, it told a story. It told some of the history of the many wars that took place in the UK. And if you look closely at the bottom of the apex, you would be able to see a story being told, carved delicately by a generation of families. When I was there, and I did have the good fortune to visit York, the docents were showing us a couple of these apex, and carved on the one I looked at were two warriors. These warriors had the mesh helmets on, and they were holding an individual. One had the right leg, one had the left leg. He was upside down, and he was being skinned to death. These are the stories that surround what they call the chapter room in York Minster. Next slide. If a generation is 18 years long, 14 generations of families worked on that magnificent cathedral. Next slide. That brings us to the first and second industrial revolutions. The Eads Bridge was the first steel bridge in the United States, and it still functions today, installed in 1874. Thomas Edison, he started the recording industry. And I half suspect that 1909 Buick Roundabout, Jay Leno may have one of those in his little collection of 169 very prestigious and very rare automobiles. Next slide. With the advent of the first and second industrial revolution came a lot of change to the workforce, because they brought us steam engines, mass manufacturing, and electricity. So child labor laws were passed in this country. They had already passed them in 1833 in the UK, that prohibited children younger than 15 from working in the factories all day long. At the time, there were new safety standards in those factories, and children as young as 6 years old were responsible for pushing bobbing carts weighing up to 25 pounds to the individual seamsters so they could continue their work. Migrants were brought in to help replace the children after the labor laws went into effect, and the migrant children also were sent to public schools. And how did we get public schools? Next slide. A small little group called the Georgia Teachers Association lobbied hard for every child to have a public education. And so they convinced the governor in the Constitution of Georgia in 1868 to set up the State Board of Education. In 1904, the state law permitted county boards of education, and thus community interest, community economic development was started. Next. But all this takes money. In order for you to train the public and to educate them, you needed some dollars. The first piece of federal legislation to provide federal money was the Vocational Training Act, Smith-Hughes Act of 1917. And I am delighted to say that it were two Georgians, former Governor Hoke Smith and Representative Dudley Hughes, who actually authored that bill. Next slide. In many of our prosperous cities, say Baltimore, Norfolk, Philadelphia, New York City, they already had public schools that had some form of vocational education there, but not so for the rural areas. You had to go into the family business. And back then, the jobs that they were training people for, next slide, things like plumbing, boiler making, agriculture, home economics for the little ladies. And I thought this was interesting about the Ford plant. The first automotive factory was in Tarrytown, New York, started by General Motors in 1896. Henry Ford comes along and says, I can do better. And so he goes and buys this land outside of Detroit and creates the River Rouge, basically city, 75,000 employees, 90 miles of railroad track, 27 miles of conveyor belts, and 53,000 pieces of equipment. But when he started this factory, what started to die off were generational skills, because now you could learn on the job. Next slide. With the Smith-Hughes Act came these vocational tech boards. Each state had a VOTEC board, and those boards reported to a larger VOTEC board in Washington, D.C. So the instructions to the state VOTEC boards were based on the needs of the nation at large. So during the 1930s, for example, the career fields that you could choose were based on trying to get people back to work. In the 40s, we were trying to get people to help with the war effort. During the 50s and 60s, transition to peacetime. And this is about time what we call the third industrial revolution. The knowledge economy started to take hold. And it was in 1963 that practical nursing became a field that you could get a certificate in. Somewhere between 1970 and the year 2000, VOTEC got a bad reputation because it was viewed as a career field that you went into if you couldn't get into college. Well, today, those so-called blue-collar jobs are in high demand. And I'm going to let Dr. Thomas tell you about the new collar jobs that we have that the Technical College System of Georgia.
Sorry, I was muted. I had to unmute. This virtual world is new and creates different kinds of challenges for us. Greetings again, and let me begin by saying that we are certainly not your daddy's VOTEC. 80 brought us up from a historical perspective. And, you know, I remember when I was in high school, skill classes or VOTEC classes were places that you went sometimes when you didn't know how to do anything else, or you did not perform well in your other classes. I am here to tell you today that that should not be the case for us anymore. And clearly, the Technical College System of Georgia is proving every day that we are not your daddy's VOTEC. I'll go to the next slide, please. A little bit about the Technical College System of Georgia. We have 22 colleges, 88 campuses, and over 600 programs of study. We are very affordable. Our tuition rate is about $100 per credit hour. That is a bargain that most people don't realize. And also, a lot of people don't realize that we serve a lot of students across the state of Georgia. I don't think that Adi mentioned that when many years ago, when technical colleges were developed, and as we have grown over the years, I remember Governor Zell Miller wanted to make sure there was a technical college within a 20-minute drive of every Georgian in the state of Georgia. And so our colleges are located all over the state and easily accessible for students. Two-year colleges nationally serve about 40% of all college students across the state of Georgia, across the United States rather. And in Georgia, you know, we are very, very fortunate that we have the HOPE grant and the HOPE scholarship. Most people don't understand or know that in many of our programs, because we take a building block approach, most of our students start off in a certificate as a credential or a diploma as a credential rather than an associate degree. If they start there, then they are eligible to receive the HOPE grant, which is different from the HOPE scholarship because it does not have the same GPA requirements. So a lot of people don't realize that 29% of our students receive the HOPE grant as they matriculate in one of our colleges. About 42% of them receive federal financial aid, that's HOPE, Pell, and federal student loans. Another important fact about us is that, you know, we, in 2019, we served over 28,000 students in dual enrollment programs throughout the state of Georgia. And we grew at a very, very high rate in terms of serving dual enrollment programs. And then as we kept fast forwarding and looking at how important the work that we were doing at TCSG is to our economy, the legislature and the powers that be decided that there are 17 pathways for which a student can attend at a technical college totally free. Free, free, free. 17 career pathways. And those 17 career pathways tuition is supported by, again, the HOPE grant. Those career pathways are listed on the slide, but a few areas I'd like to highlight: computer programming, construction technology, diesel equipment technology, lineman, movie production, huge in Georgia. These are industries that are linked to the economic viability of the state of Georgia. Welding and joining technology. Just think about welders. You've got underwater welders, you've got above ground welders. A lot of careers require a welding expertise. Of course, practical nursing is another one of those tuition-free programs. And under these two, I want to add that these tuition-free strategic industry career pathways are all the highest degree that you can get in the tuition-free strategic industries programs is a diploma. Does not go to the associate degree. Then once you decide, but many of these career pathways can take you to an associate degree. For an example, movie production. Most of us have a certificate, diploma, and an associate degree. So students can take a building block approach. The beauty of this is, you know, so often you talk to students about what they want to be when they grow up. And the answer is, oh, I want to work in the movie industry, or I want to work in the medical field. Health science is a great one to start with. But then they get into the program and they say, ew, I don't like the sight of blood. But if they have started off in a certificate or a diploma, they have not invested as much. And because we have multiple career pathways within those general programs, it is easy for them to regroup and start something different that they're more satisfied with. Go ahead to the next slide, please.
Go on.
So one of the things, the facts about technical education, just a few facts about technical education. Our information, what we do, the way we look at careers is very research-based. We look at what's going on in the economy. We look at what's going on in the world. And a couple of things that this slide will show you is that we have something for just about everybody, whether you're a high school student. We try to speak to parents. We want people who want to advance their degrees. We want people who don't have a high school diploma or GED to be interested in what we do. But our information is research-based, and we've done some work in terms of looking at our economic viability by creating reports from an organization called MZ. And so our 2019 report gave us some very, very critical information. You can go to the next slide, please. Some information was I am so sorry. That is what happens when you are in a virtual world. I'm turning that off. I apologize. I thought I had that word wouldn't ring, but I'm old school and I still have a landline, so I apologize. 78% of our students who attend dual enrollment or take technical college coursework in high school are more likely to go to college. That's a huge, huge factor, and we're seeing more and more of that in terms of completion. Our graduation rates have continued to go up over the years. Some professions make more with a 2-year degree than a 4-year degree. Radiation therapy, a construction manager, think about air traffic controller and the salaries that they get. And we'll talk about some of those salaries a little bit later. And technical education, we look at more than just how to prepare the student for the career. We provide a very strong supportive structure, mentoring. We are affordable. We provide career placement. Our mission is workforce development. And if you're coming to one of our programs and not going to work, then we've not done our job. We're not true to our mission. So we work really, really hard to remain true to our mission in the technical college system of Georgia. Technical careers are in demand. 1 out of 84 and 1 out of 84 jobs in Georgia is supported by TCSG or its students. The average TCSG associate degree graduate will see an annual earning of $8,400 higher than a person with just a high school diploma. And get this, lifetime earning increase of $336,000. Some careers generate much, much more. So for every dollar a student spends on technical education at TCSG, they net $7.10 more higher in future earnings. And that corresponds to an annual rate of return of about 29.8%, higher than the stock market 30-year average of 9.9. So great, great, great data there. Next slide, please. So the question then becomes, what's the economic impact to Georgia? Why is that so important? Next slide, please. Next.
That's good.
Thank you. Go back one to economic development. Very good. In 2018, the state of Georgia invested $1.5 billion to support the technical college system of Georgia. In return, the Georgia's economy will grow by $23.6 billion over the course of students' working lives. Huge investment. So it makes sense that our investment in technical education is working for the state of Georgia. For every dollar invested in TCSG, Georgia will receive a cumulative value of $15.70 in benefits. And we've done our economic impact study in the state of Georgia. And so these numbers are supported by the data. And we'll have some information at the end of the presentation showing all of our reference materials for this. Between 2012 and 2022, there will be, get this, over 50 million job openings for technical college graduates across the country. And this information is in 78 career and technical college education facts. And so we'll have that information available for you too as a reference slide. Next. So I'm always, I can't go anywhere without talking about Southern Crescent Technical College. It is my passion on serving students in technical colleges. I'm very passionate about it. I've seen the value of it. I've seen what it does for our economy. I've seen how it changes lives. At Southern Crescent Technical College, we say that we build strong students, strong careers, and strong communities. And as you look at it, we have resilient careers. So we offer a lot of different programs. And I'm going to add to this slide by saying what you see on this slide for Southern Crescent is fairly typical for every technical college in the state of Georgia. There may be some differences. For instance, on the slide we have cardiovascular technology. Not every college offers cardiovascular technology. Not every college offers registered nursing. Not everyone offers respiratory therapy, but most of our colleges will offer a wide degree of many of these programs. Southern Crescent Technical College is known for its film and production technology programs as well. Now, all colleges offer film production. We have a grand film studio that was supported by the community in that area. So we work collaboratively with the Georgia Film Academy at Pinewood Studios to offer our programs. The other, I think, important thing that you don't necessarily see on this slide is that in all of our programs, we partner with business and industry. We don't offer them in a vacuum. We have advisory committees that sit on our programs of study that tell us what to offer. They tell us how to change them, because we all know that careers change. And of course, COVID-19 has changed the way that we do business, because this year we've noticed a huge surge in online learning. I mean, we've had online learning in the technical college system of Georgia for a long time through what was called the Georgia Virtual Technical College. However, many of our students opted for face-to-face. What we're finding now is that there is a critical demand for online learning, so much so that most of us converted many of our face-to-face classes that we were going to offer this fall term to online learning, because our online learning classes were just bursting at the seams. And so I believe that we will see a dramatic difference in the way that we've conducted our business with COVID-19. Go ahead. Another important thing is that you can go anywhere from where you start with us. All our colleges are accredited by the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools, SACS, COC. Many people in education understand the value of SACS, COC. It is the same accrediting body that accredits the university system institutions. So, and because of this correct accreditation, because it's of the accrediting body's demand for quality, we've been able to enjoy an articulation agreement for many of our programs with our university system partners. On the previous slide, you saw a couple programs: general studies, interdisciplinary studies. What can happen with us is a lot of students, particularly now in the age of COVID, have decided to begin with us and to take all of their first 2 years with us, all of the general core, the economics, the history, the psychology, the algebra, even the chemistry, biology, to take all of those classes with us and then transfer them. We have a system-wide articulation agreement with the university system that will transfer 27 of those general core classes if you take them at a technical college system of Georgia College and transfer them to the university system. So it is a wonderful bargain for us. Next slide, please. If you need a GED, we have a cost-free program for that. Programs and coaches will support you through achieving your goal of getting a high school equivalency. If you need financial aid, we have counselors to help you navigate that. We also offer English as a second language. Most people don't know that. And I like this part. You need reassurance, we have that too. We're highly supportive. Most of our colleges have career and academic placement centers with counselors who are available to help you through. We have tutorial support. We want to make sure that students are success. Student success is really important for what we do. Resilient careers for resilient people. Next slide, please.
And I had a question for you, Dr. Thomas.
Yes.
Quickly, while you had that slide, we had a question in there saying, are there any specific requirements to be in that GED kind of help program, or any of them to get into the technical colleges like GPA?
No, we don't. We are open. Let me begin by saying we are open enrollment for our colleges. We meet you where you are to get you where you need to be. We use placement tests sometimes to determine what the best courses are for you. But no, you don't have to meet a GPA requirement. Many of our programs do require high school diploma or GED, which is another reason that we support you through a GED and adult learning programs, but you do not have to have a specific GPA requirement. I will add though, that we have competitive admissions programs, and those competitive admissions programs have certain admissions requirements, but students can prepare for those competitive admission programs by enrolling in some of our learning support or our general core classes to get there. But no GPA requirements, but we do have high school diploma or GED requirements for many of our programs. But there are some programs now in which you can dual enroll while you're still in a GED program. So we recognize that for some people, and I say this all the time, if you told me that I had to take my entire high school and roll it up into one test, I'd be overwhelmed, or a battery of tests, I would be overwhelmed. And so we recognize that some students who are working towards the GED get overwhelmed. They don't feel successful as they're working toward it. I've waited until I'm 30 years, oh my God, I don't know what to do. So what we have done for some of our programs is that we've created a dual enrollment option within GED, similar to what we do with high school students, to allow them to dual enroll in some certificate programs so that they can work towards a career while they are working on the GED. But we have lots of different options for admissions. So what I would always suggest that people do is, if you're interested in pursuing your career or changing your career, just call your local technical college and reach out and talk to us. We have people available to talk you through and to talk about the best way to get you from where you are to where you want to be. Again, building strong students, strong careers, and strong communities. That is what we're all about, and the support that accompanies that. Now let's talk a little bit about the resilient jobs. Go back one slide, because I do want to hit on that. Most people do not realize that many of the jobs that we're talking about and the salaries that have salaries that are huge. If you scroll down this list, you have for the Technical College System of Georgia, respiratory therapy. That's a 2-year program. You can make $70,000 a year as a respiratory therapist. Cardiovascular technology, think about the person who is in the cath lab, who is scrubbing in, my granddaughter is doing that now. She calls it first scrub with the surgeon in the lab. You can make up to $87,000 a year doing that. So these jobs that I'm talking about are jobs that provide a lot more than a living wage, but only require a 2-year degree. Next slide, please. So, but wait, there's more. Careers of the 21st century will require additional skills, knowledge, and a recognition that our work may not always be here on planet Earth. And so with this one, I'm going to turn it back over to Adi to take us to the future.
Thank you so much, Dr. Thomas. And I'm excited about the future because, next slide, we're looking at the brave new world of space. If you recall, May 30th of this year, SpaceX Crew Dragon sent up 2 astronauts to meet up with the International Space Station. They were up there for a few weeks and then came back home safely. Well, there are several more space trips that are planned. And I thought it might be interesting to give you a little peek inside one of these SpaceX Dragon Crew vessels. Look at those seats. Look how it's been designed. It reminds me of a fabulous, luxurious nail salon. There's also a mission to Mars that is planned. It's going to leave in October of this year, and another 4 astronaut mission that's going back to the International Space Station, and they'll be up there for 6 months. Next slide. There's also the brand new space planes. The United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs has this plane that's going to be launched in 2024. And the mission behind this plane is to give those countries who cannot afford their own space program, let them go up into outer space to see what all the hoopla is all about. And when you start launching things like space planes, you're looking at new careers in space. Next slide. Jobs of the future, blockchain development through the existing fintech programs, nanotechnology, augmented reality developers. Licensed practical nurses are still going to be in high demand. Things like space lawyers, space antenna techs, launchpad technicians. Even they're going to have space tourism. But one that really interested me is the cloud computer developer, because you need them not only in the future, but you need them right now. So I started looking around to see, are there any job openings right now for cloud computing developer? And came across an opening right here in Lithia Springs for a global technology cloud developer engineer. Look at that salary. From $82,000 to $143,000. And NASA is on a hiring binge right now. If you look at the information technology specialist salary from $142,000 to $170,000. These are definitely jobs that can support a family, I think, in high style. Next slide. And if you have a few extra shillings or a few extra dollars, you may want to think about taking your next vacation at the Aurora Station Luxury Hotel in 2022. It's only going to cost you $9.5 million, and they're already taking reservations. Technical skills are the essential careers that built civilizations, led to economic development and individual empowerment. We built the past. We're building the present, and we hope you will join us as we build the future, because it just might be out of this world. Thank you very much for attending.
Thank you so much, ladies. I'm going to give you just a couple questions that we saw in the chat. So if anyone else has questions, go ahead and put them in the Q&A or in the chat box, and we'll try to get as many as we can. That was such an engaging presentation. We had a lot of people with extra questions on there, especially about how do we get access for the parents that they're serving. So they wanted to know, how long will these tuition courses be tuition free? And are they available at all of the technical colleges or just at certain ones?
So the tuition-free courses are available at all of the technical colleges, and they have been available for the last few years. We anticipate that they will remain available. The purpose of those tuition-free programs is to support the high-demand careers in the state of Georgia. And so part of the reason I think that Georgia has been named the #1 state to do business in over the past few years is because of the support that we receive from the legislature. And this support is the tuition-free programs, the high-demand career initiatives is some of that support that helps to propel our economy to #1. So I think that that's going to continue for years to come. Absolutely.
And so that's at any technical college throughout the state.
Any technical college, all 22 offer those high demand. Now, not every college offers every program, but if that college offers a high demand career program, one of those in those career pathways, it is absolutely free.
Okay. And another question that we had was, do you offer any type of tuition discount for senior citizens to take the classes? We know there's a lot of individuals who maybe are looking for a second career, even a lot of kinship care where grandparents raising grandchildren, unanticipated second careers needing. So discounts.
Absolutely. We do have programs at all of our colleges where Georgia citizens who are 65 years and or older can take our classes free.
If there's room.
Yes, if there's room. If there's room.
Okay, awesome. And so let's say that some of our listeners are maybe a family resource center and they work with parents through home visitation, supervising visits, or just through parenting classes, and their parents are kind of struggling economically or for jobs. What would you say they should keep on deck, or what should that parent educator know to kind of connect them?
Again, you know, I would make sure that I'm in touch with my local technical college's website to start with. And there is a wealth of information on our websites. In addition to that, the technical college system of Georgia has a very robust and dynamic website. You can go to that website. There is a chat counselor there who can talk to you. You can search career options or programs, and it will tell you where they're offered in the state of Georgia. So there's a wealth of information on the Technical College System of Georgia's website, and that is www.tcsg.edu, or in the local technical, or at the local technical college's website. So I would really suggest that you do that. The second thing that I would suggest is once you peruse the website and your appetite is piqued more, take some time, pick up the phone and call the local technical college. Go take a visit, do a tour. Many of our websites also have virtual tours available. And so just contact the local technical college and find out what's available. Schedule a visit with the career placement office there, and then they can help you navigate. The other thing that I did not mention, you know, we talked about student support. The state of Georgia approved a career navigator for every technical college several years ago. And so all of us have a position on our campus called navigator. And that person's position is really to help us to ensure that people receive the resources that they need to be successful. And so one of the things that we do, and I think this is important in our success story, is our faculty monitor the success of every student in every course. And if for whatever reason a student appears not to be successful in their course, that student is referred to the career navigator, and the navigator reaches out to the student to talk about what are your challenges, what's going on. Is it attendance? Is it sometimes it's a childcare issue, and we try to refer them to services that can help them to support them to completion. So a lot of supportive services. But again, I would encourage people to go to our websites and take a look at them.
So we have a couple more questions pouring in. So what are your recommendations for getting this information to all high school students in a meaningful way? College prep is still available as an ideal route for all students, helping them know there are so many amazing options that fit their best learning style and their best option. We know our schools are kind of set up with one kind of learning style for the most part, but reaching out to these students and letting them know like your skills are valued, or, you know, are valued as well.
So most of our colleges have very, very strong relationships with their K-12 partners. And there are many career academies that are located in close proximity to their technical colleges. For an example, for Southern Crescent, our main campus is located right next door to the Griffin Region College and Career Academy. The same holds true for our Henry County campus. We're right next door to the Henry School Systems Career Academy. And so we work collaboratively with our K-12 partners to ensure that students have the information that they need. Our recruiters are assigned to high schools. So at one point, I would say a few years ago, the information was a bit of a challenge because parents said, my kid is going to college. And it was really hard for us to explain to people, we are college. our programs are highly technical. But so we had a huge effort in terms of marketing and trying to reach out to parents and to our high school partners to say, hey guys, here we are. Here's what we offer, and here's what it can do for you. So more and more and more, we have found that our programs have become a first choice rather than a last choice. Our average age student 5 years ago was about 27 years old. We've seen that continuously drop, such that now we have a lot of high school students who have made this their first choice. And then if you go back to the slide where I talked about the dual enrollment numbers, we have progressed really fast with dual enrollment students. So more and more people have come to understand the value of what we offer, and the value from a financial perspective in terms of tuition and fees, but also a value in terms of long-term career opportunities.
Yeah, and that's why I love that you started off today with showing those amazing things that technical skills have built that have lasted centuries and centuries that sometimes we overlook a little bit more in our education system today. So it's a great point to reach them and let them know. Another question we have is, do you have to be a U.S. citizen in order to take advantage of the tuition-free programs?
There are various opportunities at technical colleges for people who are non-U.S. citizens. Of course, we have rules like everybody else about how to navigate that process. So I would suggest that whatever your situation is, contact the local technical college again and find out more about our application process. But we do have a lot of options.
One person asked, what about tuition help for middle-aged people that want to return for school? So if you don't qualify for the 65 and up, do you qualify for the other ones?
So again, a lot of people don't realize, but they do qualify for the Hope Grant. The other thing too is that we also have a lot of scholarships that are supported by our foundations. Every technical college has a foundation. We also have a Technical College System of Georgia Foundation that supports students who matriculate at technical colleges. So there are a lot of different scholarship options. Many of our scholarships don't have the GPA requirement attached to them. So again, whatever your particular situation is, I would suggest that you, again, reach out to the college because I can assure you that there's someone there who's willing to work with you to find a way for you to support your career goals.
Okay, awesome. Are tutoring programs in place to assist IEP foster kids? And this is from Miss Ben. So if you have any clarification, I'm not sure if I know that exact term, but you guys might know.
I'm familiar with IEP. Again, we don't have counselors that support IEPs the same way that you have them in the K-12 system. However, again, student success is a very, very important thing for us. And so we try to work collaboratively, again, to meet students where they are to get them where they need to be. So we have a number of students who matriculate with us who are on IEPs.
Okay, awesome. So it's not just like kind of wherever you're coming from, you guys have counselors and really a lot of navigational support to help people get through this program in there.
Yeah, you would be very surprised at the support systems that you can find in your local technical colleges. Again, student success, student support, those are very, very critical for us. And we understand that it's challenging sometimes to matriculate. We have a lot of first generation college students as well. And we know that the application process, we know that the financial aid process can be daunting. So we try to make that as easy as possible and provide as much support as we can to help people to get through.
And I wanted to throw one thing in. We're a one-stop shop. You come to us and we'll help you wherever you're at. We'll meet you where you are to make sure that you're going to be successful. And as a matter of fact, every year we have a bit of a competition to find the #1 technical college student in the entire state.
Yeah.
It's called our goal competition. And if you are the winner of the goal competition, we give you a car.
A new car.
New car. And you are basically an ambassador for the technical college system of Georgia. And you get to go and talk to those legislators and tell them how critically important the work we do at TCSG and our individual colleges is to this state.
Okay, Miss Winfrey, we'll take that. Giving out cars. I have heard from previous ones, is there any transportation assistance for students? Knowing there's 22, so that's a lot throughout the state, but certainly transportation is an issue in rural areas.
So transportation really is one of our biggest challenges, and particularly in rural areas. And I regret to say that we don't have transportation support for students particularly. But again, I will give you some examples from Southern Crescent. We have campuses in Griffin, McDonough, Thomaston. Some of our areas are rural as well. But the workforce boards have transportation systems in some of the more rural areas, and we've worked collaboratively with our workforce boards to try to help students to get where they can get to and from. I'll give you a good example. We had a student who was, and somebody mentioned IEP, and this is going to resonate with you probably. We had a student who had some special needs, and she worked really hard to pass her GED. Had some family challenges. Her parents were bringing her every day for adult ed classes. Mom got sick, dad got sick, they could not get her there. The college came together to make sure that Christina got the transportation that she needed to get to class every day. Once she transitioned from adult ed to our credit program, she's doing phenomenal. She's received the support of our special populations coordinator. Part of her challenge was she was sight impaired. And so she has a lot of support from the college in special populations in terms of Braille, converting things to Braille so that she can easily matriculate through her classes.
And we're hopeful that moving more of our programs to online classes will also be a better reach, especially for our rural students.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm just seeing in the chat box, a lot of people are saying that not only will this help the parents they serve, but a lot of them want to go back to school. Those kind of high demand jobs that they saw that salary slide probably.
You know, I say this all the time. When I sit behind my desk all day, and when I get tired of sitting behind my desk and frustrated, I have the wonderful option of getting up and walking around and just kind of meandering through our state-of-the-art labs. And when I do that, I'm always in awe, because I mean, there's always something new, great, late and great, a new machine or something that the faculty is very, very excited to show off. And every time and this is every time I walk into one of those labs, I always say to myself, what person would not want to do this? This is some of the most exciting stuff that you'll ever see. Who wouldn't want to do this? So yes, absolutely. We have some great stuff, great stuff.
Our labs are best in class. And as a matter of fact, during this pandemic, when it first set in back, I'd say in March and April and May, our colleges were called upon for the state to be able to use some of our equipment at the local hospitals. And so we used our trucking program to have transport masks and other safety gear, as well as put out on loan some of our clinical equipment.
And I'm going to add to what Adi said too. If you go to visit us and look at some of our medical programs, many of our medical programs can be called up in a state of an emergency. For an example, some of our surgical suites are so state-of-the-art that a doctor could come in and actually perform surgery. That is our radiology suite. You could do radiology in it. We have a heart cath suite in our new McDonough campus. Easily a doctor could walk in and do a heart cath. So our equipment is in fact state-of-the-art. Our nursing labs are state-of-the-art. Industrial labs, state-of-the-art. Water quality, believe it or not, state-of-the-art lab. So, and everybody knows how important water quality is. So Absolutely, state-of-the-art labs, that's what we have. And our advisory committees help us to maintain them, help us to make sure that we're on the cutting edge. So every year they come in and they talk about the curriculum, they talk about the facilities, they tell us about our equipment, and then they help us to reach out to raise funding to make sure that we stay state-of-the-art, because we want people ready to go to work on day one. Absolutely.
Oh, awesome. Just making sure there's no more questions. People keep typing in there. Well, when you guys are so passionate about something, it really shows just how much you believe and are passionate about connecting people with great opportunities in the state of Georgia. So we want to thank you ladies so much for coming on. I enjoyed it. I think for 9 a.m., you guys had so much energy that we were getting going for this session on economic stability and mobility. So just thank you again, ladies. And for everyone out there, we will be posting the slides of this presentation with a couple key links and the recording as well. So we'll make sure you have all the information and contact information. And please reach out to your local technical colleges if you guys don't already work with them, just to understand how you can better people you serve with, if not yourself, to help them with opportunities in there. So in terms of the conference setup, we have a little bit of a break. We have about half an hour for everyone to go grab some snacks. I eat a second breakfast. Grab another cup of coffee, and we're going to start back again at 10:30 with some different looks at exact policies on helping families with economic mobility. So this was a great kind of technical one, and now we're going to policy. So thank you, ladies. And
it's been our pleasure.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. And for everyone kind of waiting for an evaluation, we'll be putting it at the totally end of today, but anyone who's participated throughout will send you an email at the end of the day.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Hello, everyone. For those of you who are still on with us, our next session will begin at 10:30 a.m. So please feel free to take a quick break, get you some food, and then return to the second presentation beginning at 10:30 a.m. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Hey, Alex, are you on?
Hey, Jill. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, awesome. I just promoted you to panelist.
Changed my setup slightly, so
Okay.
is the camera going?
Yeah, and we'll just do like a quick little check and then we can just turn everything off until 10:30.
Okay. Are you gonna do like any brief intro, or is that
Yeah, so I was gonna kind of announce you, just give a your title. Is gonna put your bio link in the chat.
okay?
Let's get going.
Oh, let's see. Is it raining where you are?
Yeah, my power went out this morning, so I had to rush into the office. Everyone can hear us. They're just like on a little break in between sessions.
Gotcha.
We're just doing some quick audio and checks with our next panelist. And I'm about to post the PDF of the slides from the previous presentation in the chat box now, so you guys can check that out. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for just 1 second, just to make sure, Alex, that, you know, whatever happens will happen now rather than in a couple minutes, and then we can turn ourselves off for a second. Let me know when you're ready to share and I'll take mine down.
Sorry, I forgot I was muted. I was saying that you can go ahead and take it down. I can share my screen.
Okay, awesome.
Cool. And can you see this? Okay. Great.
Yeah, that's good. If you just want to take it down, I'll put up just that reminder slide that we're coming back at 10:30.
All right.
Go ahead and just mute yourself. I'll make sure you know when to come back on and give you a little intro. Hello, welcome back, everyone. We are about to get going. And if you guys didn't see, I did just drop the slides from the previous session with the technical colleges into the chat box now. So you guys can check that out. And just as a reminder again, so certificates and CEUs will be given the link at the end of this session. So you will get it on the screen. Also, we'll be emailing it out to all of you guys probably a little bit later this afternoon. So expect that email at 1 or 2 o'clock with the evaluation link. And that's how you get your CEUs for this session today. It looks like we have about 226 people on. So that's awesome. Thanks for tuning back in. So any questions or chat that you have, put in the chat box. We also have the Q&A feature if you want to drop it in there. We are going to be holding questions until the end, and then we're going to be asking as many as we can get through, but we'll also give you Alex's contact email just in case we don't get through any of them. If you guys have any like aha moments or research that you want to share on this topic, again, you can go to tinyurl.com/PCA conference 1, and we still have that bingo game going, and I have the link right there as well. So you can find out on our conference website under participant resources. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen.
Awesome.
And we have Alex Carmardell. He's a senior policy analyst at the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute, and he looks primarily at policies pertaining to safety net programs within there. So a lot pertaining to the child welfare system and to families that we serve. And we're so excited to have you guys today. I know when I read your bio, I felt like I wasn't doing enough with my life. And all of your articles are so interesting to read. So we'll be dropping those links in the chat box, but we're going to let you get going. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. And thank you so much for having me and inviting me to participate in this virtual conference. I have to say, this is my first virtual conference of the year. And it's good to know that these processes are working for large groups of people. It's very encouraging. But good morning. As Jill mentioned, I'm Alex Carmardell. I'm with the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute. I'm a senior policy analyst there, and I focus heavily on safety net policies or any public policies at the state level that seek to improve or advance economic mobility for low-income families. Let's see, advancing slides. So for those who are unfamiliar with Georgia Budget and Policy Institute, or what I'll refer to from this point on GBPI, we're a statewide research and action organization that analyzes public policies and the state budget. And we make recommendations that seek to improve economic opportunity and racial equity through our analyses. Most importantly, we make recommendations about the state budget and public policies available to the general public so that they could use that information and advocate on behalf of the families and children that they serve, or just advocate as individuals for things that they care deeply about. So for example, one of the biggest products that we provide to the public every year is referred to as the Georgia Budget Primer, and it's a review of the largest areas of spending in Georgia's state budget. And we make it available virtually. It's on our website at www.gbpi.org. And we also send out physical copies. So if you're interested in a physical copy of the primer, feel free to reach out to me and we can make sure that you have that. But it is, getting that a little bit ahead there, sorry. It is a wonderful resource that, everyday folks use, lawmakers use. Again, and if there's something that you're interested in, deeply passionate about, you can find information about how the state funds those programs or issues in that primer. So if you're interested in criminal justice policy and how much the state is spending on prisons, you can find that information in the primer. Or if you're interested in child welfare and how much the state invests to protect children from neglect and abuse, you can actually find that information in there as well. Let's see. So what I'm here to discuss today, though, is Georgia's safety net programs, which are a big part of the human services infrastructure in the state of Georgia. And before I get too deep into the presentation, I want to provide some clarification on what I mean by safety net. Sometimes when people hear that safety net term, it comes off as super broad. So allow me to specify a little bit here. When I use the term safety net, I'm referring to programs that are traditionally considered to be quote unquote welfare. And I apologize, you'll see my dog moving back and forth in the background. She is definitely an exciting coworker to have in my space. Like I mentioned, safety net is traditionally referred to as welfare programs. And we'll see or may ask, why am I not just using the term welfare? Well, years of research has shown us that welfare can be a bit triggering and may trigger some harmful stereotypes about participants in public assistance that I'll get into later on in the presentation. But for the purposes of this discussion, I will probably use both terms interchangeably. But the safety net that I'm discussing today refers to programs or policies that focus on improving families' economic security while helping them meet their basic needs, such as food, shelter, running water, etc. And the notable programs and policies include, but aren't limited to, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, or what is still commonly referred to as food stamps, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, or Tanf, which is the program that provides direct cash aid to families with very low or no income at all. Medicaid, which is a major source of health coverage for very low income Georgians. Unemployment insurance, which is another form of direct cash assistance, but only available to workers that were recently laid off due to no fault of their own. And there's also childcare assistance, which helps parents with low incomes pay for the extremely high cost of childcare in the state. There are other programs that aren't included here in this slide that also fit in that safety net umbrella, such as housing vouchers, so Section 8 housing vouchers, and tax credits such as the Earned Income Tax Credit or the Child Tax Credit. So I may have mentioned earlier, I'm very passionate about protecting and strengthening the safety net for low-income Georgians. I myself was raised in a household that was familiar with these programs at a young age. And as data shows, they have the potential to lift millions of families above the poverty line when they work well. Further, access to public assistance is an economic and racial justice issue, full stop. And it's one that many great leaders and advocates have fought for many years. So on this slide is just a quote from one of the most well-known advocates for economic dignity and the protection of anti-poverty policies. When accepting the Nobel Peace Prize, Dr. King spoke fervently about ending hunger and poverty, stating, "I have the audacity to believe that people everywhere can have 3 meals a day for their bodies, education and culture for their minds, and dignity, equality, and freedom for their spirits." This is just a quote and something to reflect on throughout the presentation this morning. So in that same theme, I want to dive into a brief history of the safety net in the United States. The United States has a long history of providing entitlements to people who are considered unable to work. And one of the most well-known and important welfare programs in the history of the US is the Social Security Insurance Program. This was known as the greatest piece of social legislation ever enacted in America and signed into law in 1935 by President Franklin Roosevelt. And it has really stood the test of time as an income supplement for people who are no longer able to work as a result of both age and disability or other caregiving responsibilities. Aid to Families with Dependent Children, or AFDC, was also passed in that same enabling legislation, which is direct cash assistance. Paired with this was the Unemployment Insurance Program, which provided cash benefits to workers who, like I mentioned, are laid off from jobs due to no fault of their own. And later on were Medicare, disability insurance, food stamps, and then the conversion of AFDC to TANF that we are familiar with today. In 24 years ago, I'm sure many of us remember when United States President Bill Clinton took to the television airways to announce to the world that he had a plan to end welfare as we know it. This quote unquote welfare that we know of today is defined by that 1996 legislation, which was titled the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act, or PRWORA, and I will just refer to it as the Welfare Reform Act because that is a mouthful. But you know, the years leading up to the passage of that Welfare Reform Act in 1996 were very tumultuous, particularly for anti-poverty advocates. As the US emerged from those New Deal era reforms, policymakers really sought to eliminate entitlement programs such as cash assistance because of frustration that they were just handouts to people who refused to work. They were particularly concerned with this notion that able-bodied adults, which is a term that is still present today in the law, were given too many handouts, as I mentioned earlier, and becoming quote unquote dependent on welfare benefits. They would argue that the dependency on welfare would encourage things like single mothers to remain unmarried, and crime rates among the nation's poor would rise. It's important to note that to date, very, very little evidence exists to suggest that welfare breeds crime, and numerous studies following the passage of the 1996 law found that welfare spending in states has actually led to lower rates of crime. And one of the most renowned scholars turned politicians who spoke and wrote often about the nation's poor was Daniel Patrick Moynihan. His work and perspectives on poverty still exist in the welfare laws of today, which tend to focus very heavily on personal responsibility and individualism as conditions of poverty, instead of massive structural issues in society. In The Politics of Guaranteed Income, Moynihan wrote that the issue of welfare is the issue of dependency. It's different from poverty. To be poor is an objective condition. To be dependent, a subjective one as well. Being poor is often associated with considerable personal qualities. Being dependent, rarely so. In a world where completed men and women stand on their own feet, persons who are dependent hang. So nonetheless, beliefs were still driven and are continuing to be driven today by this culture of dependency myth and racist attitudes, quite frankly, about the welfare queen, which I'll speak to more next, which has led a lot of Americans to have very little confidence that public assistance could be the answer to fighting poverty today. By the time that 1996 welfare reform law was signed, the myth of culture of poverty and dependency had already deeply permeated the belief system of Americans, and still, like I mentioned, remains evident in the policies that we are talking about today. And I'll expand a little bit more on the welfare queen myth before going into the specifics of the policies. And I have a video that I'm going to show. But before I click play on it, I just want to talk about briefly how the welfare queen myth really fed on the national discourses about being too dependent on welfare. And it was authors like Moynihan and politicians, the media, and other architects of the welfare system that we are familiar with today that used that welfare queen myth to advance policies that inflicted tremendous harm on the safety net, particularly for very low income women of color. So I imagine many of you are familiar with this stereotype or this trope, but I want to play a snippet of this video that my colleagues put together that explains how the myth emerged and how it has real consequences for how the safety net is shaped today. And I won't play the whole video, it's 5 minutes, but I'll only play like a minute and a half.
Started in the 70s in many conservative commentary, but Ronald Reagan really, took it to the next level when he ran for president in 80 and 84. And he had this story he would tell on the stump. It was part of his stump speech.
In Chicago, they found a woman who holds the record. She used 80 names, 30 addresses, 15 telephone numbers to collect food stamps, Social Security, veterans benefits.
And so it was this whole image of someone abusing the system and in fact getting rich and living luxurious.
You don't ever have to really use kind of racial terms. That kind of language in and of itself evokes kind of this racial resentment.
Welfare is to help those who are the neediest of the needy and not to bring in children to the world they cannot care for.
Section 8 rental vouchers. Medicaid, free health care while I'm paying up the wazoo for health insurance. The parasites outnumber the producers.
This guy is a parasite. And my contention is that the Obama administration is encouraging parasites to come out.
With welfare reform that took place in 1996, it fundamentally changed what states could do and have a lot of discretion in how they determine who was eligible, and the system became much more punitive. It actually denied a lot of eligible folks resources.
Today we are ending welfare as we know it. We all know that the typical family on welfare today is very different from the one that welfare was designed to deal with 60 years ago.
People know exactly who you're talking about. You're really talking about Black people. And when we're talking about public assistance, oftentimes people are seeing those as Black women.
And I think people have been fighting against that narrative to say no.
All right, so let me see.
Actually,
oh, there we go. I just wanted to share commentary that briefly explains how the myth emerged, the welfare queen myth emerged, and how it has really invoked some controversial and really racist attitudes that are embedded in the safety net policies that we're familiar with today. But I don't need to belabor that point much further, I don't think. So moving on, the emphasis on individual responsibility that is prevalent in the discourse and in the policy undermines the real effects of what some refer to, others may be familiar with this concept of colorblind racism, or others even refer to it as muted racism in the safety net or welfare policies. Welfare, so the policy doesn't have to specifically name race. In fact, the laws do not, right? They don't name that as a factor, or maybe some of the disparities that are racialized are not named explicitly in the law and how we deliver programs and services at all. Although there are, bigger conversations circulating around how to integrate that into safety net programs. But for the large part, they are mostly colorblind. And as a result, there are some pretty devastating effects to actual public policy because, again, discourse, messaging, framing, perceptions have material effects on the way that we devise and implement public policy in the states. So like I mentioned, the political, social, economic structures that perpetuate poverty among, these Americans becomes ignored. And instead, people living in poverty who are disproportionately Black and brown folks are blamed for creating their own conditions. And that failure to acknowledge how significant those discourses about welfare has caused what I have been arguing is an assault against the safety net. For example, the Urban Institute conducted a major study that evaluated the restrictiveness and generosity of welfare benefits in states and found that the more Black residents a state has, the more restrictive and less generous the safety net will be. In other words, Black residents are more likely to live in states where policymakers work aggressively to legislate barriers to the safety net. And it may not surprise you in this chart you can see here that those states are overwhelmingly in the South and are run by mostly conservative Southern legislatures and governors. So thanks for allowing me to set the stage a bit with a whole bunch of context. I think it's critical to understand the history of these policies in order to come up with solutions. Fundamentally, these restrictions on the safety net come to an extreme cost to Georgia's children in poverty, who are the primary beneficiaries of these policies and services. So in this next section, I'll explain why the safety net, despite its troubled past, is still so important and needs to be strengthened today. This chart visualizes the major safety net programs that are operating currently in Georgia. SNAP, which is, again, food stamps, Medicaid, which is assistance with healthcare, child care assistance, and in the corner there, which is, for some reason you can't see, is Tanf. Children or families with children are the majority of participants in all of these programs. And they provide a tremendous boost to the educational, health, and economic outcomes of these children in both the short and long term. Child receipt of public assistance isn't surprising, considering Georgia's high poverty rates. Georgia is ranked 42nd for poverty, with poverty deeply concentrated in the Black Belt region in the state that spans across the middle section of Georgia. It's the darker areas that are shaded in this map here. 1 in 5 Georgia children are living below the poverty line, And according to the latest Kids Count data book that was published by the Annie Casey Foundation, Georgia still ranks 40th for the economic well-being of children. And as you all can imagine, those data about poverty are all reflecting the year 2018. And I believe just today, the 2019 poverty data is being released by the census. But again, that only reflects 2019, and nothing exists really that reflects the poverty situation that may have been exacerbated by the coronavirus this year. We won't have that information until next fall, unfortunately. But we can, look at what's happening in the labor market to kind of get a sense of how economic hardship has been amplified as a result of COVID-19. To date, more than 500,000 people are still filing for unemployment insurance per week. These are folks who are laid off from their jobs due to no fault of their own. This is nearly 8 times than the number of people that were filing for jobless aid during the peak of the Great Recession 10 years ago. And these are Georgia families with children. And they are living in households that have now experienced exploded economic hardship that is expected to be sustained well into the next year. And we know that families, looking back at the poverty information that I shared in the previous slide, families that enter into an economic recession or downturn that in poverty or in economic instability have the most difficult time emerging or recovering in the years following the economic crisis. I also wanted to note, like this chart shows, that the unemployment insurance system, which is a big part of our cash aid safety net, is able to respond to the explosive need that we face this year. And it's not perfect. There are still people who are missed by this, who apply for jobless aid but end up not being eligible. And there are a bunch of administrative hurdles that are still in place. But there were a number of emergency policy changes that were made to make access to UI easier, which we need to be maintained beyond the public health emergency. But unemployment insurance is just one example. The safety net as a whole is powerful policy when it's defended and strengthened. Safety net programs bridge the gap between the rising costs of basic needs and the low wages of workers. They are designed to encourage work and upward mobility, which is why they've been able to lift millions of people out of poverty in the last decade. Low wages do not provide enough income for families to fully participate in today's economy and achieve self-sufficiency. So the safety net kicks in and makes up for lost ground. For example, a single parent of one who earns a minimum wage of $7.25 an hour would spend a quarter of their paycheck on food alone every month. Even if earning slightly more than minimum wage, safety net programs still play a critical role in helping them provide for their families. In this chart, which may be a little difficult to read, so I do apologize, but you should be able to see that a single parent who works full-time earning $10 an hour would be deep in the hole at the end of the year without the help of the safety net. At that same wage rate, $10 an hour, with income support such as SNAP, childcare assistance, and the EITC, that same parent would actually have positive net resources to help them thrive over the course of the year. In effect, the safety net prevents that family from falling deeper into poverty while providing an opportunity for them to boost their savings. This statistic is called the Supplemental Poverty Measure, and it tracks poverty also by counting the value of non-cash benefits and tax credits, which substantially offset low wages. These supports contribute significantly to lifting Georgia women out of poverty in the absence of higher incomes, as seen in this chart. And I also want to highlight the role of the safety net in helping to prevent child maltreatment. There's a growing body of research that builds on the child well-being work by looking specifically at the impact of the safety net on child welfare outcomes. And I just wanted to highlight a few here. For example, Paxson and Waldfogel find that when states increase investments in public assistance, cases of child neglect decrease. SLAC was able to show that when the safety net is able to offset low wages, the risk of families being reported to child welfare decreases. Just this year, Brown and DeCow found that states with more generous unemployment benefits and direct cash assistance are able to reduce cases of child neglect. And lastly, also from this year, Sandner found that cases of child maltreatment decline when states and counties invest more in their child care assistance programs. A common theme in the literature is that parental stress, often driven by and the driver of poor health and poor economic circumstances, can negatively impact overall child well-being. So the literature agrees that the safety net can improve child welfare outcomes by helping parents mitigate the stress of worrying about where the next meal will come from, whether or not the lights will stay on, or whether or not they can visit the doctor's office. Despite the powerful role that the safety net plays in curbing poverty, the policies are still threatened today in Georgia. So I'll highlight just a few ways that they are threatened next. Revisiting messaging and framing. So like I discussed quite a bit earlier on, the public discourse and messaging around the safety net has harmful impacts on the way that the public perceives public assistance, which has severe negative consequences. I already explained the role of the culture of dependency and welfare queen myth has played in bringing us to where we are today. But I wanted to revisit this here to explain, like I mentioned earlier, why we use the phrase safety net in our day-to-day advocacy versus the term welfare. Like I mentioned earlier, the term welfare has horrific origins and sparks negative reactions from the public. For example, some message testing by the Kaiser Family Foundation shows that 32% of adults support reduced spending for welfare programs, but only 12% support reduced spending for Medicaid. The irony is that Medicaid is in fact an entitlement program. It is welfare. So Medicaid and other specific programs are popular, but the umbrella term for them, which is welfare, is burdened by negative connotations. So we're exploring and seeking out alternative messages to replace the term welfare in the broader public discourse so we can build more public support for the safety net at large. But safety net is the phrase that we are currently using. Georgia's labor market is still characterized as a low-wage labor market. So as long as wage disparities exist and the bulk of jobs available pay wages that fall well below the living wage, the safety net will be stretched really thin. So Georgia needs to make some structural changes, such as raising the state's minimum wage. Barriers to the safety net will need to be eliminated so those who fall at the bottom of the economic ladder aren't pushed deeper into poverty. And they're pushed already, again, by Georgia's low wage labor market. As a reminder, in case you don't know, Georgia has the lowest state minimum wage in the country at $5.15 an hour. It's true that most workers that are categorized as minimum wage workers earn the federal minimum of $7.25, but there are exemptions in the law that allow Georgia to pay workers a dreadful, inhumane $5.15 an hour. And even if you, it's even less if you work in the food service industry and earn tipped wages. Georgia's safety net programs are also plagued by what is commonly referred to as the cliff effect. So they're also called the welfare cliff, the benefits cliff. And due to harsh eligibility rules, participants are often cut off from programs once they begin to see slightly modest increases in their earnings, or choose to pursue a post-secondary education, or fail to meet difficult work reporting requirements. This cutoff is again referred to as the cliff effect, sets families back significantly on the path to self-sufficiency. A lot of studies have begun to argue that the cliff effect reinforces a culture of dependency on the safety net by discouraging work, but there is an even greater abundance of research suggesting that it's the unfair rules that are much more likely to hurt a parent's ability to navigate the labor market and find quality family supporting work. So for example, when a parent loses their job while they're receiving childcare subsidies and they're unable to meet the work requirement all of a sudden, they risk losing assistance completely unless they re-enter the workforce or training program within 13 weeks in the state of Georgia. And that sets families back tremendously because they no longer have the childcare or the ability to pay for the childcare in order to continue seeking work and find quality employment. And then the last big threat I want to mention here is block granting. Block granting is a major threat to the safety net. Currently, the Tanf and childcare programs are structured as block grants, but the president and mostly conservative governors have floated the idea of turning other programs like SNAP and Medicaid into block grants. Block grants are a fixed pot of money that the federal government gives to states, Georgia included, to provide benefits or services. And funding levels are typically fixed, whereas entitlement funding is structured in a way where anyone who is eligible for assistance can receive it. So in other words, as the need rises, the funding and the availability of funds to provide services rises as well. In a block grant, it's capped. So we can't actually address the growing need in communities if it goes beyond what the block grant funding levels are set at. So it basically renders safety net programs unable to automatically respond to increased need. So for example, for childcare, our childcare subsidy program, which again is a block grant, is only allowed to serve up to 50,000 students or families a year. There are over 300,000 students who are likely eligible for childcare, but because the funding levels are fixed and because Georgia does not raise money, state money to offset the federal funds, we can only serve a fraction of the need. But yeah, so all is not lost. There are policy opportunities that I want to summarize next to strengthen the safety net and help guarantee a more equitable recovery for children and families that are near the poverty line or below the poverty line. No surprise, the first opportunity I want to promote is to change the public narrative, which will change public perceptions and ultimately impact the public policy negative policies impacting the safety net. I detailed earlier how the concept of welfare is rooted in that myth of cultural dependency, but advocates can help to point ways that structural barriers still require us to keep the safety net intact. We start by recognizing that poverty is a condition that is reinforced by systems, not necessarily individual behavior, and those systems often have racist roots. And we cannot continue taking a race-blind approach to the safety net policy. A social policy scholar I admire deeply, Segal, says it best here in this quote: "We need to recognize that some barriers, maybe the most important ones affecting welfare recipients, are structural and not individual. And a welfare reform program that fails to address relevant structural race biases and then blames individual recipients for failing to overcome those barriers is therefore itself a race-biased policy." As the example of welfare highlights, welfare reform's failure to account for relevant pre-existing racial inequalities makes it an ostensibly neutral public policy that incorporates the race biases of the broader society into its very operation, and as a result, ends up helping to reproduce racial disadvantage among recipients and the poor more generally. The next opportunity has to do with raising revenues to grow investments in the safety net. Sadly, because of those harmful perceptions about how these programs work and who they serve, state lawmakers have actively reduced funding for the programs in the recent decades. In general, Georgia is a low-tax state, which means less funding for support for human services, education, and other investments that guarantee those 3 meals a day that Dr. King mentioned in his quote I referenced at the start of this talk. Georgia provides nearly $9 billion in special interest tax credits to corporations, while also cutting nearly $1 billion from public education and refusing to invest more into basic income supports like direct cash aid to help families remain housed, even during a Great Recession or during any recession. Georgia's revenues have remained so low that Georgia spends less per person today than we did before the Great Recession when you adjust for inflation. We say all the time at GBPI, show us your budget and we'll show you your values. Well, I would argue it's time for Georgia lawmakers to raise revenues and prove that they value eliminating poverty by bolstering investment in the safety net. Another opportunity for the state is to weed out and eradicate explicitly racist rules in safety net programs. And yes, they do exist. This is just one example that we are currently working on at GBPI. It's called the Family Cap, and it's a rule in the Tanf program. This rule basically takes away benefits from children while their mothers are receiving Tanf. The intent of the Family Cap was to prevent women from having, quote unquote, having children just to receive additional benefits, to collect benefits, playing off of that welfare queen myth that women were having children, getting pregnant, just so they can collect as many benefits as possible. This is a very outdated provision. It's based on those inaccurate assumptions about women of color mostly that are enrolled in safety net programs. Thankfully, states have recognized this and are starting to roll back their rules. Only 13 states today still have that law in place. And even Louisiana, Texas, and my home state of Alabama have repealed the policy to date. So we're working hard to make sure that the state actually does this as well. And we have great interest from some state leaders in repealing that policy, given its troubled and racist history. But like I said, this is just one example, and there are many more laws and regulations on the books that need critical attention. And lastly, another opportunity, there are numerous program barriers that prevent people below the poverty line from accessing basic help, like food assistance. So for example, the state's food stamp program, there are a lot of work requirements that participants have to meet in order to continue receiving food assistance. The problem though is that the labor market is very difficult in a state like Georgia, and even more so now because of the economic crisis that we're in caused by COVID-19. So tying the ability to find a job to someone's food assistance ignores that reality. So eliminating these requirements can play a major role in fighting hunger. All right, so before I wrap up the presentation, I do want to give you a multitude of ways to join us in advocating for improving the safety net in Georgia. First, if you want to stay alert to legislative or administrative changes throughout the year impacting safety net programs, I invite you all to join the Prosper Georgia Coalition. This is a coalition of policy advocates who convene quarterly and weigh in on policy debates at the Capitol in support of positive changes to the safety net, such as raising revenues, eliminating those harmful work requirements, or repealing the Tanf family cap. And if you're interested, just reach out to me. I'll have my email on the next slide, and information is on gbpi.org. Speaking of gbpi.org, we have a very large library of resources if you're interested in learning more about the specifics of these policies in Georgia, as well as get some data related to who the participants are and how they're faring today. Nextly, I strongly encourage you to interact daily with directly with your state lawmaker and establish a relationship. People do not realize how accessible state lawmakers are compared to those who are working in Congress. And our lawmakers meet for 40 days in a legislative session, and within a matter of weeks make law changes, policy changes that could dramatically change our lives, right? Just in 2 weeks' time, this session, they reduced funding for K-12 education in the state by nearly $1 billion. That's how quick stuff moves. So being on top of those policy debates and knowing who those lawmakers are is very important. And lastly, you can get involved in advocacy action as an individual. A lot of people confuse advocacy with lobbying. You don't have to be a registered lobbyist to engage and educate your lawmakers about issues you're passionate about. Advocacy is effective in many ways, even if it's done by email, through phone calls, letter writing campaigns with your friends and family, making noise via social media, which is very effective and powerful right now in this social distancing world, or perhaps writing an op-ed in your local paper. So I will conclude the presentation with that, and I will open it up for questions and discussion, which I'm looking forward to. And then, is it okay if I stop sharing my screen?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a couple people are putting them in. So I was wondering if you could also discuss, and we had a question about this, some of the work that you're doing around the narrative of safety net programs, and also the people and perspectives of those who are utilizing those programs, and what we can look out from your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. So about 2 years ago, we launched a campaign called People Powered Prosperity at GBPI. And that campaign really forced our organization to lean into the voices of directly impacted folks in order for us to develop sound policy solutions. So I didn't use this term earlier on, but GBPI, I use the terms research and action organization, but we're a think tank, at its base level. And a lot of think tanks just throw a lot of policy solutions at the wall and don't consider the unintended consequences for communities, for specific communities, because they don't they don't listen. They don't listen to them. So we went on a very lengthy learning journey to all places all across the state: Savannah, Albany, Floyd County, which is Rome, Georgia, up that way, Athens, a number of other places, to hear from folks who are participating in these programs about what their needs are and how the policies and the program administration create gaps in access and additional program barriers for them. So we compiled all of that information from those listening sessions into a very comprehensive document that we use to guide our policy approach, the development of policy solutions. And it's really been the foundation of how we came up with some of the opportunities I lifted up in this presentation, such as repealing the family cap, which was something that we had no idea was creating a barrier for particularly for women with young children, until we heard about it on the ground from directly impacted folks. So we're taking that information. We're also doing a ton of messaging research with colleagues across the country to understand what works best to help move a policy agenda in a state that is, candidly, a Southern state with more conservative leadership, where the Southern strategy was deployed to reduce, to kind of stoke anti-safety net sentiments. We have to move a little bit differently in the South than we could, in other places. So we're doing a lot of message testing on that front. We're polling folks to see what works, similar to what Kaiser did with its polling on welfare and Medicaid. And in the next year, we're looking to deploy that messaging to help build the capacity of our partners who advocate with us, because there are some partners who believe in the power of these programs and policies, that want to protect and preserve and strengthen them, but still use harmful language to describe the programs and the participants in those programs. So we have a lot of work to do to build up the capacity of our ecosystem to help change the public narrative and perception.
Yeah, and I know a lot of us are really just surrounded in areas where it's only reinforced. So to hear it the first time, the second time, it takes many times. And the facts and data like presented, as well as personal relationships with others who have different lived experiences. I know PCA Georgia is working on poverty-informed training right now to help just with perspectives of that and understanding other people's lived experiences, as well as some great policy on your end. So we have another question. So we just released the Child Abuse and Neglect Prevention Plan for the state, and a big part of that is economic mobility. So we're hoping that you can speak to some more about how state or local agencies can best advocate for families that we serve, which you have been the whole time, but specifically what's on the horizon for 2021. We know there's so much chaos ensuing, but especially what's on the horizon that might come up that we can go to war for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So because budget is in our name, that's kind of like where I start, and encourage others to weigh in heavily, because that's an area that is pretty, still pretty mythical to a lot of folks. It's difficult to understand. And the primer that was shared earlier highlights the budget process. I'm on the ground, just advocating for more and more folks to join us in protecting the little investment that still remains in economic security programs. Right? So currently the state of Georgia does not invest substantially into its cash aid program. That Tanf block grant that I mentioned earlier, only 20%, a fifth of that grant goes directly to families to provide cash. And we fought, really hard this year to get the state to issue more direct payments to families in the absence of continued relief at the federal level. And we're still kind of sitting on our hands waiting for it. In the meantime, evictions have soared, utility shutoffs have resumed, and people are really dealing with hardship. But dollars are sitting, on the table that we're just leaving there, that could be going to help families mitigate economic hardship and keep them adequately housed, et cetera. So we're going to continue to push for that, and we invite everyone to join us in pushing the state to think about, actually valuing giving families cash assistance. because right now we're not doing it. Tanf is the cash assistance program in Georgia. Back in 1996, when the welfare reform law was signed, we were serving over 100,000 families in deep poverty. And again, you have to be in deep poverty to be eligible. Today, we're serving less than 9,000 families. That is nearly a 99% decrease in the Tanf caseload. And it's because, again, those negative perceptions of the policy about the culture of dependency, et cetera, that have really pushed us off the deep end as far as Tanf. We believe in the value of giving cash aid to folks and how important it is in an economic crisis. So if we can have help in looking at that source of funds as a source for direct help to low-income families and families in deep poverty, then that would be, great. That'd be exceptional.
Yeah, if this isn't an economic crisis, then I don't know what would qualify as one, certainly for many of the families in Georgia. And when you talk about deep poverty, the federal poverty level was created in the 1960s, so it's still kind of really outdated. It doesn't account for what childcare costs, all the transportation that is needed. So all those things. So when we say deep poverty, it's super deep. For a family of four, I think it's $25,000 a year or less, and that is kind of peanuts when it comes to essential resources in there.
That's right.
So we have another question. So what is the best way for a local organization to advocate? And I would say sign up for the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute newsletter, because as the session goes, they're going to be posting a lot of things that are upcoming. It's hard to anticipate all the bills right now, or some things happen almost not behind closed doors, but you have to kind of know and be there rapid pace. But they post so much stuff out there of things that you can call right away about of the moment. And they put out so many policy briefs to help everyone understand why this is needed that you can share. But you answer for your organization now if I miss anything.
No, I think that covers most of it. And I say, local organizations are our partners, right? Like our partnerships are defined by groups who are on the ground and providing those direct services to individuals and families, and also providing the platform to integrate the voices of directly impacted individuals into our work. So, we of course invite you to stay on our email lists and stay tuned, follow us on Twitter and get engaged in the virtual conversation, but also to join our campaigns, where you see fit and what you see on our website. There are a number of campaigns. I mentioned Prosper Georgia is one. There is a campaign around enacting a state earned income tax credit. We're involved in the the Cover Georgia campaign, which is a Medicaid expansion campaign, as Georgia is one of the very, very few states at this point that has not expanded Medicaid.
Medicaid expansion has also shown reductions in child abuse and neglect within those states.
That's right. That's right, exactly. So we need as many voices as possible, and local organizations, particularly nonprofits, provide the best source of information when we're, it just even from a real-time example, whenever we advocate, we physically go, or whenever it was safe to do so, go to the Capitol and testify in front of lawmakers about the need to protect these programs. We need more service providers in those rooms testifying as to why their programs are so necessary and need to be supported. And another thing, and I can go on about this all day, local organizations or nonprofits are partners in the safety net because a lot of them receive public dollars to administer those programs. They receive contracts and other things. So whenever those programs are threatened, particularly from a budget perspective, that hurts our nonprofit community who are providing services directly. And, for example, this past year, it hurts my heart to say this, but Tanf had to eliminate 13 contracts that went to nonprofit providers that help individuals find meaningful employment during a recession. So it's incumbent that the providers who are working locally on the ground are engaged in these conversations so they can defend those programs.
Yeah, and it's also important to point out that a lot of our state employees also have a lot of these dollars as part of their salary. So as a state employee, you're not allowed to lobby, but you are allowed to educate. You are allowed to have an individual voice by reaching out to representatives when you hear it. You are allowed to forward emails. So I would say that's a great way you should care as an individual about your own salary, the people that you're serving, things like that.
Yeah, and we have I'm friends with a lot of state agency staff. I have a special heart. I think that's why I do the safety network, the human services advocacy, because bureaucrat, I have my training in bureaucracy. I have a public administration degree, so I have a special heart for folks who work in that space. And I have friends that I invite to also weigh in on our issues today, not as a representative of their agency, but, as individuals. And whenever we show up to protect investments in the safety net and from protecting the Department of Human Services from budget cuts, for example, it's about protecting those frontline workers. It's about protecting those caseworkers from having their jobs furloughed or getting them cut. So, yeah.
And so when we ask for money, or we ask for expansion of different programs, so what is something that we can do to offset this? So we can't just make money magically appear within our budget. So how can we raise the revenue?
Yes, so there are various ways to raise revenue, and have an entire section on our website with some revenue raising options. We have like a menu of options. I mentioned earlier that, the state gives away $9 billion in tax credits, special interest tax credits to corporations, while also making cuts to programs that we all care deeply about, like healthcare and education, and human services. Those credits are offered to companies without any real formal review. I think the only formal review that's ever been done in the history of the major tax credit programs was the film tax credit, which was conducted at the end of last year and created a lot of controversy this year because they found out that we were giving billions to the film industry, but they weren't creating jobs for Georgians, and the jobs weren't creating meaningful pathways to other opportunities. So, we need more of that evaluation so that we can figure out how to scale those back, so that maybe we could put $1 billion or $2 billion back into our education system, into our child welfare system, et cetera. So I'd say that's one. There is a growing conversation and really popular bipartisan conversation happening right now around raising the tobacco tax. So we know that we have a tobacco tax that is well below the national average, and it siphons off hundreds of millions of dollars that could go towards prevention, but also help us fund fund healthcare, right? So that's another option that's on the table. And there have been bills in recent years to support that. And like I said, growing interest. So, joining in on that would be helpful. And then lastly, there are some tax loopholes in the tax code that need to be addressed. Georgia has a regressive tax code in the state level, meaning that those who earn less actually pay more of their income.
Oh, no. Okay, so it looks like perhaps he was kicked off for a minute. So I think he's going to probably join back just momentarily. So we'll look out for him there. But I also just wanted to discuss on the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute. So when you do see that those kind of bills are coming up to raise some of the revenue, to look at those, and if you feel appropriate to advocate for different things about them. I know a lot of our partners in the child welfare field have also been advocating for raising the tobacco tax. We're one of the very bottom states when it comes to how much that we are having for tax in there. And just having a secure safety net when we talk about preparedness for natural disasters, for pandemics, for all these economic crises, having these in place equitable safety net policies and programs is one of the biggest ways that we can help prevent some of the hardest hit, most vulnerable people that are out there. So having them quick and in place. I'm gonna look for him to be reattended. Okay, that message. If you guys have any more questions, so I see that we'll be sharing a presentation. Yes, we'll be posting up the PDF slides after this on our website. Another one, have you been successful in engaging the business sector leaders and advocating for these important policies? So I know that's a really big one for Essentials for Georgia. That's the CDC kind of framework to put them out there. So their People Power Prosperity